Hey everybody, welcome to Neil Talks. My name's Neil, and it's time to talk QI. This week's viewer recommendation takes us to Stephen Fry's last season, the second episode of that series. This one's called Military Matters. So it'll be an interesting episode as far as how much of our subject material stays on all things war and military. But the guests, I won't say they've been spoiled for me, but I am aware of who the guests are. It's a Jimmy Carr episode, always a good time, but more interestingly, it's a Jeremy Clarkson episode. And I know my Top Gear well. I watched all of the original series. I watched the three gents on their Amazon specials. I'm quite a fan. Now, of the three, I'm more a James May guy than a Clarkson guy, but I appreciate Clarkson for what he is and the fact that he embraces his role so well. And he's clearly also the true driving force of that original Top Gear series. It was a shame the show had to end, but I understand why it did. There's a weird sort of pride in that one of the very last, if not the last episode of their run on Top Gear was, at least of the ones that were aired, was filmed here in my province of British Columbia. Yeah, and then I feel like the next week it might have been canceled. Nevertheless, I'm sure he'll be his typical Clarksonian self on this, which ought to be interesting. I imagine he garners a lot of klaxons. But it'll also just be another fun episode of QI, because they always are. So let's jump into it. This is episode 2 from Series M, Military Matters.
Tonight we're on parade for all things military. Here to do battle are the flag-waving Jimmy Carr, the saber-rattling Sheila Hancock,
Do I know her?
mongering Jeremy Clarkson,
He looks mischievous already.
the ambulance-driving Alan Davies. What was unusual about Britain's war with Finland in 1941?
Well, not a shot was fired.
Oh!
Though it was the only time I think that two democracies have ever gone to war with one another.
Oh.
That's a hell of an alarm.
Yes.
Does it know what we're thinking?
Yes, definitely.
How did you know that?
Welcome to my world. 11 years ago, Jeremy Clarkson, you said on this very programme
That
the
was true.
1940s.
Why is it? Have we declared war since the show started?
A viewer named Otto Lowe has written to us.
Otto,
Yeah, to point out that we were wrong, so we're retroactively taking points from you today. You had a slightly bad start to the year, but now it's got terrible. Or the football war of 1969 between
What was
El
that?
Salvador and Honduras.
Football war.
It only lasted 10 hours, must be said.
Was there a half-time?
there
where
was
they
a-
had on?
Stop for orange
What's my
slices.
original answer then, which was not a shot was fired?
I'm afraid that's not true either. 13 people were killed in the Anglo-Finnish War.
But
The
by
British
shots or
attacked a
by
port called Petsamo on the 30th of July, 1941.
other means?
I still think it's the only proper war fought between two democracies.
You know,
Give in,
hooliganism.
Jeremy, give in.
Well, Wikipedia has got more accurate since then. But
Thanks, Otto.
now, if I could be serious for a moment, more than 100 million people were killed in wars during the 20th century. Einstein described war as a cloak that covers acts of murder, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry called it a disease like typhus. With all that in mind, why did Hitler have such a silly moustache?
What's the tone of this episode supposed to be?
This is a difficult show for me to be on because I'm a Quaker pacifist. So
Oh no.
It's a very admirable thing, and the pacifism is taken very seriously, isn't it?
yeah.
Well, it's a lovely thing until Hitler comes along, and then it's not much use.
Well, and I
Philosopher.
think the reason he had that moustache is he was probably a fan of Oliver Hardy.
Or Chaplin.
But there are a couple of stories. No one's quite sure which is true. There was a fellow who served with him, Alexander Moritz Fry, great uncle Alexander. He was in the same regiment in the First World War as Hitler, and he said that Hitler trimmed it into the familiar toothbrush in order to fit into the gas mask properly. Fry's account is controversial, apparently.
So here's the point about Hitler. He's judged very harshly by history, but he did kill Hitler.
A few years too late.
And his sister-in-law, who lived in Liverpool,
She had one as well.
do you know what her name was?
Muriel.
Almost. Bridget Hitler.
Bridget Hitler.
Bridget Hitler.
Bridget Hitler.
Bridget.
Had a son, William Patrick Hitler.
Willie Hitler.
William Patrick Hitler went to America and won a Purple Heart.
Changed his name, I presume.
Eventually to Stuart Houston, I think. And he claimed he wanted to forget anything to do with his uncle, but he named his first son Alexander Adolf Stuart Houston.
In the American phone book, I know there's a weird fact, it's quite interesting, might work on this show, where there's still, I think, 9 people called Adolf Hitler.
Really?
That were obviously born before.
To watch it, because in 11 years they're going to ask you a question here.
She told him that he should trim the ends of his moustache to make it less bushy, but as she put it, as in most things, he went too far. Everybody remembers the mutiny on the Bounty, but give me the name and rank of the man who was overthrown and cast adrift in an open boat.
Christian.
Not.
Fletcher Christian, wasn't he the one that... wasn't he? Is this just the BBC still getting at me?
So is this like right after they got cancelled?
Fletcher Christian was the one who
mutineer.
did the mutinying, but captain... Was he a captain and was he called Bligh?
He was a lieutenant commander.
I thought it was Marlon Brando.
But Bligh seems to have had problems commanding people because he was made governor of New South Wales. And they mutinied. There was a military putsch to kick him out.
He obviously had the knack.
So this guy had a knack of upsetting people he worked with.
See,
Yeah.
What?
Just putting it out there.
Describe the mutiny of the monkeys. One in the middle was going to an England match.
Peter Talk had had enough.
Peter. He's very
See
good.
what I did there?
His mum invented Post-it notes.
Yes, which came about because they were bad stickers. Because they didn't stick properly, and then they thought, hang on a minute.
They should have used super glue, because that never sticks anything to anything.
I've lost the thread of this conversation.
You may not be alone, Jim.
Or was it
It
Tipex?
was in fact Tipex.
Was it Tipex?
Yeah, but, yeah. It was in 1890. It was a British vessel called the Margaret, which travelled from Durban to Boston, and it contained a consignment of 400 cockatoos, 12 snakes, 2 crocodiles, some monkeys, a gorilla, and an orangutan to be delivered to an American zoo. Almost immediately, things started to go wrong.
I think I've seen a documentary about this. Is it called The Life of Pi? So go on, what kicked off? So they're on a
Well,
boat.
the rats ate the grain, which was intended for the cockatoos, so they all died. There was a storm, the snake and the crocodiles escaped, so the crew barricaded themselves into their cabins. But then, fortunately, the crocodiles and the snake basically fought each other until there was only one crocodile left. And eventually, some cargo fell on it and it was killed. And then the monkeys escaped and climbed the rigging. And then they were swept off to sea and drowned. By the time they did get to Boston, there was a gorilla, 3 monkeys, and 4 parrots left out of that whole consignment.
That's
That is why
terrible.
Boston Zoo is shit.
What's a better way to get out of the army than shooting yourself in the foot?
Putting your underpants
Section
on your
8.
head and pencils up your nostrils.
What's that a reference to?
A bibble. Bibble.
Now, or in history.
First World War.
To say you were homosexual? I know 1 or 2 actors who pretended they were gay to get out of doing conscription.
I've known more actors who pretended they were straight, but there we are. There was this idea of a blighty wound where you'd be invalided.
Chop your cock
out.
off.
Well, it was considered desertion.
Cheese grated off.
Just me, if you haven't tried it, don't judge.
So there was another way.
Running away.
Fraternised?
Well, fraternising in a very particular kind of fraternising.
Come down with an STD?
You're on leave. You go to Rouen, Le Havre.
Oh, sexually transmitted
Brothel,
disease.
gay
Yes,
brothel.
sexually
Brothel.
transmitted disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll get you discharged. It'll give you a discharge, but I didn't realize it would get you discharged.
Forgive me for asking that. Why didn't everybody simply go to a brothel in the hope that they could get a dose?
They just about did. That's my point. You would get you a few months off, but that was something for that war.
But then you could go home and see the wife.
75,000 prostitutes in Paris alone, less than 10% of whom were licensed.
There were licenses.
171,000 British troops visited brothels in a single street in the Havre in just 1 year.
Makes you proud, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They really were marvellous times, weren't they?
Oh, it's such fun.
There were no restraints in France. These boys had money to spend and knew that they stood a good chance of being killed within a few weeks anyhow. They did not want to die virgins. And that kind of says all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. So,
The tone of this episode's all over the place.
I think you are. It's fun. It's so fun.
Catching the syphilis is fun. It's all the rest of it.
it's proving your point about war. Which of these was originally used for military purposes?
The bumper car.
Not the bumper car, in fact.
Ferris
Ferris
wheel.
wheel.
The only one that's correct is the merry-go-round, which was originally used for that purpose of war training. You would
Jousting
sit
practice?
on the horse, and a servant would have a ring, and you'd have a lance, and you'd go round and round.
I mean, that's surely bullshit. No?
Call of Duty's better, isn't it? Really?
There'd been a particular problem in the Boer War, where they'd noticed that the British were not very good at aiming.
I think
firing
that's the
rifles. So they passed special
Ferris
laws.
wheel
The
from
basics.
Pripyat near
They
Chernobyl.
passed special laws that allowed fairgrounds to have rifle ranges, so you could fire rifles.
Sorry, there's live ammunition in the fairground?
Yes. Live, actual ammunition, proper ammunition.
In a fairground?
Yeah.
Really? Gosh.
Wow.
Well, really?
Yeah, really.
It is frowned upon if you bring your own gun.
I was going to say.
It would be quite good to turn up at a fairground
With your own-
with an AK-47 and go, "You'll be taking that bear home?"
Have you ever fired an AK-47?
Not in anger, Joe.
No, somebody quite literally stood me in front of a barn door and I missed it. It
Of
just
course,
rides
there's a
around
recoil.
like a mad
Of course,
thing.
the man that did that isn't here to tell the story.
It never breaks down and it never hits anything.
Well, that explains all of the series of the A-Team.
Not unless they weren't aiming at them. If I aimed at you, most of the audience would be history.
That's you, not everybody.
Unless you're a burly Russian shot put enthusiast, then you could probably hold on to it, but I couldn't.
I fired a machine gun in Vietnam.
Really? Did you?
I've
Did you
done the
hit
same.
anything?
I hit the end of the field.
Yeah, I fired an M60 on Christmas Day in Vietnam. Really weird experience. Probably went to the same place.
Sheila, you're a Quaker pacifist. Have you got any good gun stories? It'd be so good, though, if you went, yeah. Has anyone ever had a go on a bazooka?
You could bazooka cows and things, but I didn't get the chance to do that.
You're a vegetarian!
See, this is what guns do.
The other thing that I heard about was that they used cattle. I know that was a stand-up routine I did. That's not true.
One important skill for a soldier is map reading, but why are maps so difficult to fold?
They're not.
Because now they're on your phone, so you've got to break it.
Well, we've got some ones that aren't on the phone.
No, they're just accordion folds. What's so hard about folding a map?
This is my idea of hell.
Of hell, yeah.
It is hell.
That's right. Because
It's not.
So there they are.
I mean, I tell you,
Yeah,
probably
Alan's
the
on it.
idea is not to unfold it in the first place, did you?
Yeah. What's so hard? I don't get it.
Oh, the chick's
Sort of doing what I do there, I think.
Haven't you got a sat nav?
Where would we be without sat-nav?
Hey! Studios, I don't know.
Come on, everyone, make an effort.
Most maps have got 9 folds one way and 2 the other, which means that there are 2,048 different ways of folding them. 2 to the power of 11.
Yeah, only if you're a nincompoop.
This way of doing it, and all you have to do is that, and it folds. You just push the corners together.
It wouldn't work if you gave it to me.
It just
Take the
does it
corners
by
and push them
itself.
together.
Oh, my God.
That's it.
That's cool. I'm not lying that that's cool.
This man is the greatest genius you ever met.
But would it work with a bigger map?
And they are very
I
handy.
would have been so fucking pleased.
They give you each a tissue. All right, so pass.
Okay.
Tissue,
Pass
tissue.
down. Oops.
What are
We
doing
all
with it?
fall.
With the tissue?
Do is scrunch it up
Oh, yeah, okay.
like this in your hands.
Yeah.
You scrunch it up, and then
Stick it right up your
Is this
bum.
gonna be a magic
no.
trick?
Don't think of an animal. Like, I'm thinking of an animal. I'm thinking of a sort of swan or something like
I've
that.
really
Oh.
scrunched mine up.
I'm thinking of a swan. You see? There you are.
I've got tiger.
I was
I've got
thinking of a
absolutely
slug.
nothing at all.
Oh, well, I thought of a badger, but he got run over.
But what's the most morale-boosting thing you can find in a meat pie?
Cocaine?
People, people,
Yes, people.
people in pies.
People in
What?
pies. Philip the Good was the ruler of Burgundy. 1356, probably, I wouldn't be surprised. 1454. He held a feast for knights. It was a PR stunt to promote a crusade that he wanted to hold against the Turks, and they'd taken Constantinople. And it included a meat pie which contained 28 musicians. Yeah. Who
Alive?
played throughout the meal. It's alive. And a lion chained to a pillar. That protected a statue of a nude woman who served mulled wine from her right breast.
Is that a party at Elton John's house?
A giant came on with an elephant on a leash. The elephant had a castle on its back, and the castle had a dishevelled nun, and she implored Philip to go on a crusade.
A dishevelled nun.
Apparently dishevelled. All his guests, caught up in the excitement of the pie, which had so boosted their morale, that they said they would go on the crusade too.
Is that like the birth of the elephant and castle concept?
I'm fascinated by this dishevelled nun.
Yes. Well, the word dishevelled is used in Chaucer, you may remember. And,
I don't remember,
well,
Stephen.
No,
I
fine.
don't.
Did you know him at all, Sheila?
He uses the word hevelled. The man's head is cleanly hevelled. It means so
Dishevelled.
dishevelled means uncombed. What's the worst thing you can find in a Morrison sandwich?
Well, Morrison was food minister during the war.
That was a Morrison
that's
sandwich.
Straight to it. But he came up with a home defence idea, which was a type of shelter.
A dear friend of mine was in one of those, and her house took a direct hit, and she survived.
Yes, it actually worked really, really well,
Yeah,
it seems.
yeah.
But sometimes the top bit, which was solid metal, just crashed down, and the person was caught in what was then called a Morrison sandwich.
Wow.
But
I sleep with my hand over my head because there was an escape hatch at the back of the Anderson shelter with a spanner, and I used to sleep like that on my bunk, and I still do. I sleep with one hand over the hand.
You could probably sleep somewhere else
There's
now.
one on the right, and this one on an Anderson shelter.
There's one on my farm, and it's just full of pornography.
That used to be a thing, though, didn't it? They used to, whenever you would walk through woodland, I remember that as a teenage boy, there would always just be pornography
Yeah.
lying around. Sort of in the days before the internet, there was
It
just
is.
porn lying about.
In the woods.
You used to walk through the woods and there would be porn lying about.
All everywhere.
Well, this is very odd.
So, single shoe, strong pornography in the wood.
Well,
What a strange world you live in.
Morrison sandwiches could be deadly, but Morrison's sandwiches are, of course, delicious. How do all female military battles differ from all male ones?
The reason there's never been an all-female war is because there's plenty of me to go round, I think.
They might have to bum out.
Yeah, so we're not talking about human beings in that case.
Oh.
Oh, an animal war.
Animal
Bees.
Bees.
Bees went to war.
Yeah, bees war on other hives,
thought-
other colonies. The queen is the one who doesn't fight, but all the other
Yeah.
females who are sterile.
Are there other female
Oh, yes,
bees?
there are, but they're sterile. And they launch a turf war against another colony.
These are not
Gruesomely.
British bees.
No, they're Australian stingless bees. Yeah.
British bees would know better, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
British bees wouldn't bite legs off.
Yeah. So, in scouting for boys,
Sorry, your hobby?
it is, of course, by the founder of the Scout movement, the Scouting
Baden-Powell.
movement.
Baden
Powell.
Baden. He said of bees that they're quite a model community, for they respect their queen and kill their unemployed.
Oh.
Now, what begins with M that you could shoot with one of these?
Those guys are tiny.
Mallard.
Mallard is very good.
That's
Absolutely
a
recognise what
duck
that is.
gun?
It's a punt gun.
It is indeed a punt gun.
Wow.
You're good old guns, aren't you, Jeremy?
I shot one of those, but I shot a clay pigeon with it. And proved that a man can actually fly. And I was airborne for 20 minutes.
That's one of the reasons they had them on punts.
I mean, the boat goes backwards.
That's the point.
You could fire that in Norfolk, and you would wind up in Stavanger 3 minutes.
One shot can destroy up to 50 at a time. So you
Was it shot like a shot?
I mean, I know you're a vegetalist, and just fine, but
Vegetalist.
what I don't understand about these is that if you actually hit a duck, it vaporised it. And apart from licking the lake or the grass, there's no nutritional value from an atomised egg.
Why do they have such a great big gun for it?
Well, it was used in the United States of America, of course. In the early by 1860, it was banned. You couldn't use it.
And then they use hand grenades now. This is another gun story, and I apologise, Sheila, but I got picked up by a man once at an airport in Phoenix, and he was the big noise in the NRA. And he drove along in complete silence, and he just turned to me after about 10 minutes and went, "What is your personal preference of firearm?" I was sort of,
And you said punk gun.
punk gun.
I almost want to go to a rifle range with you to see you with one of these guns. You're obviously hopeless at it.
What was the name of the fleet of ships that got its ass kicked in 1589 during the Anglo-Spanish War?
Not the Armada.
Yeah, that was 1588.
89.
This is the English Armada. And what's interesting is that we just don't teach this in schools. Having seen off the Spanish Armada, Drake, filled with confidence, thought they would really defeat Philip II of Spain, instead of which we lost 40 ships. And it was an utter disaster. And it's,
Yeah, well, I don't want to learn about that.
I'll give you 100 points if you can name one of the countries where either the first or last shots of the First World War were fired.
France. England. Denmark.
Jersey.
No, I'll tell you, it was Togoland.
In Africa. In Africa. It's Togo next to Benin.
It's now called Togo, but it was called Togoland then. It was a German colony. And on the 4th of August 1914, the British Empire declared war on Germany. And 3 days later, it attacked Togoland, Germany's small but strategic colony there. But the war also ended in Africa, in fact. The last actual battle took place on a golf course in northern Rhodesia, which is now called Zambia.
If you shoot
1918.
someone on a golf course, is it considered polite to shout "for"?
What happened to the last of the Mohicans?
Get a haircut.
Wild West show?
Well, what is a Mohican?
Hairstyle.
Well, aside from hairstyle.
No,
yes.
but it's
Indian.
an Algonquin tribe.
No, wait.
Say what?
I've gone and trodden on one of
upstate
those
New York.
landmines. Because you can't say Indian, can you? What do I say? Native American.
Native American.
Actually, you can say Indian African.
can say it.
They called each other Indians.
I nearly got fired for that one.
AIM is the... They're the Mohegans who live in Connecticut and run the Casino of the Sky.
The guy on the right there is rubbish. The worst Native American ever.
So the Mohican hairstyle, which you've alluded to, is only called that in Britain. What do they call it in
It's a
America?
mohawk.
Ridiculous.
They call it Mohawk.
The Iroquois had it, though.
Nor do Mohawks have their hair like that. It's the Pawnees who have their hair
The
like
Iroquois
that
had
for
it.
some reason. But let's see who is the least losing of them all. Oh, bless my blimey. Well, I have to say it's a fantastic score for a first-time performance. Quaking away at -2 is Sheila Hancock. With -8, it's Jimmy Carr. Going great guns, it's Jeremy. -13. Only just last is Alan on -14. And I leave you with this deep thought of American humorist Jack Handy. I can picture in my mind a world without war, a world without hate, and I can picture us attacking that world because they'd never expect it. Good night.
That was a great episode. Clarkson's great. The man can tell a story. He knows how to tread that line of mocking political correctness while still begrudgingly respecting it, I suppose, which certainly appeals to a large segment. Some of you, I'm sure, are watching right now. I thought it was quite brilliant to put a Quaker on the panel for an episode like this, just to get that alternate perspective. I feel like I went to the exact same place that Alan did in Vietnam, because when I did my tour there, yeah, there's like this firing range that's on the tourist circuit And yeah, you can fire an AK-47, or you can fire, I think they were M1 Garands, but you can also fire an M60. And I don't know if I remember this from my trip or I remember it from somebody talking about it, but for like a not absurd amount of money, you can fire a bazooka at a cow. Like, it's a weird place. I can't remember. I didn't see a bazooka fired at a cow, but I've heard about that. And that might be sort of like the backdoor special at this. But if you ask the right guy, he can arrange it for you. Or maybe I've just heard somebody else talk about that. I don't know. It was an underwhelming experience, and it was a very odd way to spend a Christmas day, because that's how the schedule worked out. So yeah, I was firing guns in Vietnam on Christmas Day, like 2011 or something like that. Weird. Anyhow, weird tone this episode, because we open with, you know, these serious, somber sort of declarations that, you know, all war is terrible. And then we go straight into mocking Hitler's mustache. And there were these serious turns a couple of times during the episode, because it's an episode about war, and it's a natural tangent to take. But then we're right back into the funny. And somehow it all worked. I had a lot of fun with this one. Jimmy Carr is always a great addition to a panel. Yeah, Clarkson, he's great. I will admit, I've even watched his farming special show on Amazon. I hear it's coming back for a second season. But yeah, I still watch I still call them the Top Gear specials, but they're not Top Gear. I think they're a grand tour now. They're getting on in age, but I just saw the one where they raced across northern Scandinavia in the snow. May almost sank his. What was he in? Was he in the Evo? Yeah, I think he was in the Evo. Anyway, a lot of fun. Another solid episode of QI. Thank you guys so much for your continued recommendations. If I haven't gotten to yours yet, just know that every recommendation I get, I add to the list. I'm working my way through the list. Sooner or later, I'll either run out of recommendations or episodes, but neither of those things is close to happening yet. So expect these to continue for a while. And until next time, everybody, take care, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.